The champagne glass slipped from the tray and crashed onto the white marble floor. The sound echoed through the silent hall, drawing glances from everyone present. Lily Parker, in a simple cream dress without a hint of sparkle, froze for a second. The golden liquid trickled across the immaculate floor of Manhattan's most exclusive ballroom. She calmly bent down, ignoring the judgmental looks around her, and began picking up the shards with her bare hands. One of the waiters rushed over to help, but she raised her hand firmly, offering a polite half-smile. "It's under control," she said, without apologizing. At the far end of the room, Ethan Cole, 40 years old, watched the scene with his arms crossed and an expression his friends described as neutral, though it masked a growing unease. Next to him, Mark, his best friend and business partner, leaned in slightly and whispered, "A bet is a bet." Ethan slowly turned his head to look at him but said nothing. His eyes returned to Lily, who was now standing with elegance, as if picking up broken glass at a $1 million party was part of the protocol. The guests whispered, watching the unknown bride in a dress far too simple for a setting filled with crystal, exotic flowers, and chamber musicians. The ceremony was about to begin. Lily walked toward the makeshift altar in the center of the hall, her hair pulled back in a low bun, undecorated. Her gaze met Ethan's for just a second before she took her place beside him, as if they were rehearsing a poorly written play. The officiant cleared his throat. "We are gathered here today to celebrate the union of Ethan Cole and Lily Parker." Lily took a deep breath, eyes fixed on the horizon. Her hands were steady, fingers precisely interlaced. There was no trembling, no hesitation, no enchantment on her face, just control. "It's not too late to back out," Ethan murmured, without moving his lips. "You too," she replied in a frosty whisper. The ceremony proceeded like a choreographed sequence. Every word was spoken with precision. The guests smiled, but with suspicion. Ethan, the investment mogul known for avoiding long-term relationships, marrying a delivery girl. When it was time for the vows, Lily took the lead. "I promise not to take more than what's already mine," she said, her voice clear and calm. Ethan blinked, confused, but had no time to ask. The officiant called on him to repeat the traditional vows. He did so, emotionless, his eyes fixed on Lily, trying to make sense of what she meant. They signed the papers right there in front of everyone. The kiss was brief, almost procedural. And then the applause, the music, the facade. But the game was only beginning. Hours earlier, Lily had woken up alone in her small Harlem apartment. The window let in the constant noise of the city, the muffled sound of horns and hurried footsteps. She made coffee with steady hands, then dressed slowly, double-checking the folder with the documents she'd take to the wedding. As she pinned up her hair, she listened to the footsteps of her upstairs neighbor. She grabbed her phone, opened the photo gallery, and looked at the picture of her parents, both deceased for 5 years. She pressed the side button, locking the screen. There was no room for longing today. She left the apartment, declined the taxi waiting for her, and chose instead to walk to the station. A symbolic choice, crossing Manhattan by subway to marry a millionaire. Over the past few months, Lily had lived between bike deliveries, hidden spreadsheets, eavesdropped conversations, and sleepless nights. She knew about the bet. She had known from the start. She overheard Ethan and Mark talking on a client's rooftop balcony while she delivered a box of confidential documents. "I bet you don't have the guts to marry someone outside your world. Like a delivery girl. How much do you want to bet?" In that moment, something inside her awakened. That's when she decided to play the game. At the wedding reception, Ethan tried to appear natural, but he was restless. Guests asked questions, offered forced compliments about the bride and the decor. "So, are you going to introduce me to the bride or keep pretending this is just another charity project?" one investor joked. Ethan forced a smile. Lily approached with a glass of water and handed it to him. "Maybe you should drink," she said, her voice low but firm. He looked at her cautiously. "You're different. And what did you expect? A shy girl grateful for this fairy tale? No. I thought you'd be easier to manipulate." She raised an eyebrow. "Then I'm sorry to disappoint." "Why did you agree to this, Lily?" he asked, dropping the calculated tone. "For the same reason you made the bet. I wanted to see how far you'd go." Then she handed him the envelope. "What is this?" "The answer to all your questions." He opened it. Inside were bank documents, holdings in international funds, properties in the name of a family trust, amounts far exceeding Ethan's own wealth. "This isn't real." "It is, and everything you thought you knew about me, Ethan, is a lie." She took a step back, smiling. "I hope you bet big, because you just lost." He stood there, envelope in hand, as guests smiled for the cameras in the background. In the silence that followed, as music played and waiters served more champagne, Lily turned and walked out to the balcony. Ethan didn't follow. He couldn't. He was still trying to understand who exactly the woman he had just married really was. "This is going to weigh on your conscience, Ethan. Betting with someone's life isn't just some casual game." Mark's voice was firm, though laced with a malicious chuckle. Ethan slowly swirled the glass of whiskey between his fingers, leaning back in the leather chair of the penthouse where the two met almost every Friday. Outside, the night was dotted with city lights, the kind of view only someone with millions in the bank could regularly enjoy. "It's just a bet, nothing serious," Ethan said with a restrained smile. "A bet that involves marrying a woman you barely know," Mark insisted, raising an eyebrow in challenge. "This is a new level even for you." "Ah, you said I wasn't capable of committing to someone outside my circle, that I lived in a bubble. I'm just proving you wrong," Ethan replied, bringing the glass to his lips. "And, come on," she agreed. "Because you pulled her in with promises and cheap charm? I bet she has no idea who you really are." Ethan didn't answer. He knew Mark was wrong about one thing. Lily had a very clear idea of who he was, maybe more than he would have liked. 6 months before the wedding, Lily was pedaling through Manhattan traffic, balancing an insulated backpack and skillfully dodging potholes with the ease of someone who knew every corner of the city. Traffic was worse than usual, and she was sweating despite the cold that numbed her fingers through her bike gloves. "Last delivery of the day," she muttered to herself, face tense and eyes locked on the GPS screen strapped to the handlebars. The address led to the rooftop of a luxury commercial building where a private investor's party was taking place. She knew that because she'd been there before. Always delivering documents, never food. Confidential documents, and tips far too generous for just an envelope. Upon arriving at the building, she entered through the side entrance and took the service elevator to the top floor. The doors opened into a sleek penthouse with minimalist decor and a view of the Empire State Building. Soft ambient music added a sophisticated touch to the space. She walked up to the security guard at the rooftop door and gave the recipient's name. "I'll take it from here," the man said, reaching for the envelope. "Specific instructions. Deliver directly to Mr. Ethan Cole," Lily replied politely, with a slight smile. The guard hesitated, then gestured for her to go in. Out on the terrace, the night was mild, with a gentle breeze. Men and women in expensive outfits discussed business around tables with wine glasses and cigars. In a more secluded corner, Ethan stood, chuckling at something Mark had just said. Lily approached quietly, handed over the gold-labeled envelope, and turned to leave, as she always did. But this time she stopped. She couldn't explain why, but something about that moment demanded more attention. And then she heard it, the sentence that would change everything. "A delivery girl. Now that would be a challenge. I bet you wouldn't have the guts to see it through," Mark teased. Marry her? That wouldn't take guts. That'd be fun. And frankly, it doesn't sound that hard, Ethan replied, with the same carefree smile he wore in his PR campaigns. A real wedding, Ethan. Rings, judge, marriage certificate, not just a media stunt. If I win, you double your stake in the European fund. If I lose, I put my name on the Qatar project. Mark extended his hand. Ethan shook it. Lily stood frozen for a moment, silent. Then she turned, walked calmly to the elevator and went down. On the way back, anger wasn't the first thing she felt. It was curiosity. Why would someone make a bet like that? And why her? In the following days, Lily researched everything about Ethan Cole, his empire, his reputation as a ruthless strategist, his speeches on meritocracy and efficiency. She watched interviews, studied his investments, and learned who his allies and enemies were. And then she remembered something even more important. The name Cole was directly tied to the company that had destroyed her father's business 5 years earlier. A predatory investment, acquisition of a real estate asset through a subsidiary, sale, multi-million-dollar profit, and the destruction of a family legacy. At the time, Lily was just a design student with a part-time internship. She watched it all collapse, and after that, she left behind her degree, her last name, and her past. She chose to survive in anonymity until that night on the terrace. In the months that followed, Lily got close to Ethan. He recognized her on the next delivery. He made jokes, threw out charming comments, and she responded with carefully measured smiles. A dinner was suggested, then another. She never pushed anything. He led. She simply cleared the path. She knew he thought he was in control. They talked for hours. Ethan began to see her as a refreshing break from the monotony of the corporate world. Lily, meanwhile, was piecing together a much bigger puzzle. By the third week, he casually brought up the idea of marriage. She pretended to be surprised, then charmed. When the formal proposal came, Lily already had everything she needed, the evidence of her own inheritance hidden under a trust. She never needed his money, but she needed to prove a point. She accepted. On the morning of the wedding, Lily looked at the dress hanging behind the bathroom door of her small rented apartment. The fabric was plain, white, without sparkle or veil, chosen deliberately. Sitting at the kitchen table, she reviewed one last time the documents in the envelope she'd hand over later. Bank statements, property records, investments under the Parker family holding. No one but her lawyer knew about any of it. She had kept it well hidden. The game was set. The present now was the day after the wedding. Ethan was alone in his office, the envelope with the documents still on the table. The party was over, the guests back to their lives. But he couldn't sleep. "Who are you, Lily Parker?" he murmured. He reread the pages, tried to trace the companies, the numbers. Everything led to one name, the Parker family, an old traditional holding that vanished after a financial scandal. He hadn't known that Lily was the last heir, or that the investment that ruined the Parker holding had been signed by his company, betting with someone's life. Yes, he had done that. But she had been playing too. The difference was, Lily had known exactly what she was doing from the start. And now, Ethan was beginning to realize there was far more at stake than just his pride. The sound of the door slamming echoed through the empty penthouse as Ethan walked down the hallway with heavy steps. The clock on the wall read 2:47 a.m. He was still wearing the suit from the previous night's wedding, now wrinkled, with the tie hanging loose around his neck. He hadn't slept. He couldn't. He tossed the jacket over the armchair and loosened the tie completely, letting his body collapse onto the couch. The envelope with Lily's documents still sat on the coffee table, as if taunting him. He had read those pages dozens of times, and still, nothing made sense. The woman he thought he knew, or at the very least could manipulate, was far more than she appeared to be, and now, beyond being his wife, she was also a mystery that had reopened an old wound he barely remembered existed. "This can't be a coincidence," he muttered, picking up his phone. He typed Parker Holdings into his company's internal system. The response came quickly. Hostile acquisition through the purchase of undervalued assets. Transaction led by Ethan Cole 5 years ago. The words hit him like a punch. Lily wasn't just wealthy. She was the daughter of the man whose company he had helped destroy, even if it had been disguised as a strategic decision. He dropped the phone and rubbed his face. The moral hangover was beginning to weigh far more than any alcohol from the party. A few blocks away, Lily stared out the window of her hotel room. The wedding dress hung over a chair in the corner, looking oddly out of place in the modern, minimalist space. She had already showered, changed into an oversized t-shirt and cotton shorts. Her hair was loose, still damp. Even so, she couldn't relax. Her heart pounded, not from fear, but from anger. Seeing Ethan again, lost in the face of the truth, had given her a bitter sense of closure. She had imagined that moment 1,000 different ways, but none of them seemed enough now that it had actually happened. She wanted him to feel it, to understand, to look at her and see not a delivery girl in a cheap dress, but the woman whose family he helped ruin because of a spreadsheet, a graph, a growth opportunity. Lily sat on the edge of the bed and picked up her phone. There was one unread message. It was from Margaret, the only person who had known the truth from the beginning. "Are you sure about this?" She typed a brief reply. "Never been more sure." The next morning, Ethan woke to sunlight streaming through the gaps in the curtains. His face was creased, his head heavy. In the living room mirror, he saw himself, red eyes, an exhausted expression. Without thinking much, he took a quick shower, threw on a white shirt, and left. He didn't notify anyone. No security, no driver. He walked to the cafe where he knew Lily often stopped after deliveries. He wasn't sure she'd be there, but he had to see for himself. He sat in a corner seat at the counter and ordered a black coffee. The place was simple, filled with the scent of fresh bread and the clinking of cups, a far cry from the world he was used to. After 20 minutes, the doorbell rang. He looked up instinctively, and there she was. Lily wore jeans, sneakers, and a grey hoodie. No makeup, her hair up in a high bun, like always. She carried a bag of bread and a book under her arm. When her eyes met his, neither of them smiled. She hesitated, then walked over. "Following me now?" she asked bluntly. "We need to talk." "Do we need to, or do you need to understand what's going on?" she countered, sitting across from him. "I made a stupid bet, yes, but you got involved. You knew everything from the start." "I did, and I don't regret it," she said firmly. "I wanted to see how far you'd go." "It was just a bet, Lily. It wasn't personal." She laughed, bitterly. "Nothing's ever personal for you, is it? Not even when you destroy an entire family for a market move. I didn't know who you were." "But you knew what you did to my father." Ethan swallowed hard. "That was 5 years ago. It was just a business operation." "Maybe in your world. In mine, it was the end. My father died 3 months later, a heart attack. But the truth is, he died of shame." The silence between them grew unbearable. Ethan had no idea how to respond. Everything that came to mind sounded like an excuse. "I disappeared, sold everything I could in secret, created a trust, and let my last name vanish from every database. I worked as a delivery girl to pay for the basics and keep the rest hidden." "Why? You could have sued, gone public, because you people would have chewed me up," she said, bitter, "and because I wanted justice my way." Ethan leaned on the table and sighed. "What do you want from me now?" "Nothing," she replied, standing up. I just wanted you to know what it feels like to be used." Before leaving, she paused and looked over her shoulder. "Oh, and don't worry about the scandal. I won't tell anyone about the bet. That would look bad for me too." And she walked out, leaving Ethan alone in the small cafe, with the bitter taste of his own shattered pride. At company headquarters, Mark flipped through reports while listening to classical music at low volume. When the phone rang, he picked up on the second ring. "Ethan? Did you know who she was?" Ethan's voice was sharp and cold. "What are you talking about?" "Lily Parker, daughter of Charles Parker, the man whose holding we destroyed 5 years ago. Did you know?" Mark was silent for a few seconds. "No, but it makes sense now." "You think this is funny?" "No, I think it's karma." Ethan hung up. That night, Lily returned to her rented apartment, sat on the floor with a cup of tea, and turned on the TV. She left it on a random channel, just to hear voices. She had gotten what she wanted. The truth was out. Ethan was no longer untouchable in her eyes. But the satisfaction was bitter. There's no victory in a war where everyone comes out wounded. All that remained was to find out what came next, because though neither of them had the courage to admit it, something had started to shift between them, and that kind of pain was the hardest to ignore. "The van is already downstairs waiting," Ethan's assistant said, handing him an envelope with the trip itinerary. "The meeting's been rescheduled for the afternoon in Beacon Hills." Ethan nodded without taking his eyes off his phone. He was in his glass-walled conference room, the cloudy Manhattan sky reflected on every surface. Outside, a light rain had started to draw slow streaks down the windows. "And what about Lily?" he asked suddenly. The assistant hesitated, surprised by the question. "Do you want me to contact her?" He finally looked up, his expression unreadable. "No, she was already invited. Got the same email I did." "Ah, understood." The assistant stepped out, and Ethan remained silent for a few moments. The trip to Beacon Hills, initially just a routine visit to one of the company's new eco-centers, had become an emotional trap the moment he learned Lily would be there too, representing one of the consortium's partner companies. It wasn't a coincidence. Neither of them believed in coincidence anymore. The black van slid down the wet road as the sky grew darker. Inside, Lily stared at the trees through the fogged-up window. Her earbuds were in, but no music played. She needed silence. She needed to brace herself. She knew Ethan would be there. In the weeks following the wedding, they had kept their distance. Contact was minimal, strictly legal. There had been no scandal, no headlines. The world still believed the marriage was a romantic, impulsive decision made by an eccentric billionaire. But inside them, the remains of everything they'd said still burned. She didn't expect forgiveness, didn't want it. But a part of her, a quiet, hidden part, ached every time she remembered his face at the cafe, trying to understand what she had done. Now they'd be face to face again, no masks. The Beacon Hills Eco Center was an experimental project. Sustainable buildings, nature integration, solar panels, and hanging gardens. Lily had quietly invested in the project through her company as one of the funding partners. She arrived at the site just as the second black car pulled up. Ethan stepped out first, tall, impeccable, wearing a gray overcoat over his dark suit. They saw each other from a distance. Neither moved their lips, neither waved. "Let the show begin," Lily murmured, adjusting her hair before stepping inside. During the guided tour, they were forced to share space. Technical comments, formal handshakes with other investors, institutional photo ops. But their eyes said everything. By the third hour of the visit, after a group lunch inside the central greenhouse, guests were given a short break. Lily quietly slipped away and walked to a wooden overlook that faced a lake. The sky was still overcast, and the wind carried the scent of damp earth. She leaned against the railing, eyes fixed on the water. She felt his presence before she heard his voice. "I figured I'd find you here." She didn't respond immediately. "Do you still think this was just a bet?" she asked quietly. "I don't know what to think anymore." Ethan stepped closer, but kept a respectful distance. "I'm trying to understand." "Understand what?" "If at any moment, any at all, you were real with me." Lily turned slowly. Her face was serious, but her eyes carried a weight, a tiredness. "I was. In the silences, in the looks. When you talked about your mom and I listened. When you said you hated to lose." He closed his eyes for a moment. "I married you thinking I was winning a bet, and I lost everything." "You didn't lose everything, Ethan. You lost control. That's different." "And what did you gain from all this?" "Peace," she said without hesitation. "For the first time in years, I felt like I was doing something with purpose, that my father, wherever he is, would understand." "And now," he whispered, "now, I don't know." The silence between them wasn't empty. It was full. A distant thunder that never quite cracked the sky, but warned the storm was still there. "I missed you," he said suddenly. Lily looked at him, surprised. "Don't say that just because you lost, Ethan. It's not that." He took a step closer. "I miss you because, in the middle of all this, you were the only person who never wanted me for what I could give. I wanted you because you were real when you didn't notice, when you allowed yourself to be flawed. Then why are we still playing against each other?" She looked away. "Because pain is easier to manage than hope." He let out a humorless laugh. "That line should be in a book." "Maybe it is." The rain began to fall lightly, fine and cold. Lily stepped back, ready to return to the building, but Ethan gently caught her arm. "We're still married, only on paper. What if we stopped running?" She looked at him, a mix of anger and tenderness in her eyes. "You destroyed my past. I became your present. What's left for us to build a future on?" "Something new. Something neither of us knows yet." She slowly pulled her arm free. "Ethan, I didn't come here to start another war, but I'm not ready for a truce either." And then, without another word, she walked away across the wooden path, leaving him standing there in the light rain, watching every step she took. And there, in the middle of the silent forest, the reunion finally happened. But nothing was resolved. Not yet. Because open wounds don't heal at first touch, but they hurt less when they're acknowledged. "Why was this hidden?" Ethan asked, slamming the papers onto the table with enough force to send a few slipping to the floor. Mark didn't bother picking them up. He remained seated in his leather chair, spinning a pen between his fingers with the kind of disinterest that only someone with all the answers and no intention of sharing them could manage. "Hidden?" "It wasn't hidden. You just never asked," he replied calmly. "I never asked if you were sabotaging one of our investors." "She wasn't an investor at the time. She was just a delivery girl, then a distraction, and then, well, then you married her, Ethan." The silence that followed was sharp. Ethan stepped closer, placing both hands on the dark wooden table, his eyes locked on Mark's. "You tampered with her assets, drove down the value of the holding she manages, created noise in international funds linked to her. That's sabotage, Mark. It's protection. You got obsessed with this woman and started making emotional decisions. I had to make sure the company wouldn't be affected." "You didn't have that right," Ethan said, voice low and heavy with threat. "I had the duty." Mark stood. His tone, until now calm, grew more assertive. "You forgot who you are, Ethan. We built this together, and you threw away years of credibility for a woman who came into this game knowing every move." Ethan clenched his fists, She got involved because you made it a game, turned her life into a wager. I walked in with vanity. She walked in with survival. And now she wants to destroy everything you've built, Mark fired back. She wants justice, that's all. Oh, please, don't be naive. Ethan stared at him for a few more seconds, then turned, picked up the scattered papers from the floor, and walked out without another word. That same morning, Lily parked her modest pickup in front of a discreet building in Brooklyn. She climbed the steps slowly, balancing a leather folder and a thermos of hot coffee. The location was the office of her legal advisor and friend, Nadia. "You're late," Nadia teased, opening the door with a smile. "The business world doesn't wait for elegantly vengeful women." "I'm trying not to be vengeful," Lily said, stepping inside. "But it's hard when you find out you're being sabotaged." Nadia closed the door and gestured to the chair. "The reports are in. There's strange movement in 3 of the funds tied to your holding, all traceable back to EC Capital." Lily sighed. "Ethan nor Mark? No way to know for sure, but I can promise you it wasn't a technical error. Someone wanted to damage the returns." "What do you suggest?" Nadia crossed her legs, her expression serious. "If you want, I can go to the press. There's enough evidence of market manipulation, but it'll destroy EC's reputation, and yours too. They'll question your connection to Ethan, the legality of the marriage, your motives." Lily leaned back in her chair and closed her eyes for a moment. "I wanted justice, Nadia, not revenge." "Then you need to decide where one ends and the other begins." Hours later, at EC Capital headquarters, Ethan flipped through reports from the legal department. With every page, it became clearer that Mark was behind the sabotage. But there was something else. A document clipped to the end of the report caught his eye. An old file, nearly 6 years old, about the acquisition of Parker Holdings. In it was a marginal note with his signature. Nothing major, just a comment on asset valuation. But what hurt was the approval stamp, approved by Ethan Cole. He had been directly involved in the fall of her family. It hadn't just been a cold, impersonal move by the company. It had his name on it, his decision. He tossed the report onto the table and leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. The question echoing inside him was clear. If I were her, what would I do? By late afternoon, Lily sat on her small balcony, wrapped in a blanket, watching the sky turn orange and purple. Her phone vibrated beside her. A short message lit up the screen. "I need to talk to you. Urgent. Ethan." She hesitated a few seconds before replying. "Not today. Tomorrow, 9 a.m., Central Park, 72nd Street entrance." The next morning, the cold bit through the air as Lily walked along a side trail in the park. Her wool coat reached down to her knees, and her scarf covered half her face. When she spotted Ethan sitting on a bench, she slowed her pace. He looked tired, different. There was something in the way his shoulders slumped, as if he were carrying more than he could bear. "Are you okay?" she asked, keeping a formal tone. "No," he replied, standing. "But I don't think I ever was." Lily stepped closer, eyes cautious. "Why did you want to talk to me?" Ethan pulled a flash drive from his coat pocket and held it out to her. "This has everything: reports, transactions, records, proof that Mark tried to sabotage your assets." She took it, staring at the object as if it were a grenade. "Why are you giving me this?" "Because you deserve the truth, because I played a part in your family's downfall, and because I want to make it right." "Make it right?" "There's no making this right, Ethan. I know, but I can try to make sure it doesn't happen again. I can expose Mark, remove him from EC, start over." "Start over?" she scoffed. "You still don't get it. I got into this to prove I could beat you at your own game, but now I'm stuck on the same board." "Then let's stop playing." She stared at him for a long moment. "I don't trust you." I'm not asking you to. Not yet. But give me the chance to show you who I am without the company armor. Why? Because you're the first person who ever looked me in the eyes and saw everything I tried to hide. Silence settled between them again. Lily looked down at the flash drive. What if I use this to bring everything down? Then that's a risk I accept. And what if I'm worse than you think? Then that makes two of us. She took a deep breath, slipped the flash drive into her coat pocket, and turned to walk away. But before taking the first step, she stopped and murmured, "You have until the end of the month to do it yourself. If you don't, I will." And then she walked off, not looking back, leaving Ethan frozen in the cold park, with the certainty that the woman he once believed he could deceive now held in her hands the fate of everything he had built. The pen slipped from Ethan's hand and landed with a dry snap on the papers scattered across his desk. He was alone in the EC Capital conference room, surrounded by open folders, contracts, internal memos, and printed reports, proving Mark's direct involvement in the sabotage of Lily's assets. His breathing was heavy, deep circles under his eyes. For 3 nights straight, he hadn't slept more than 2 hours. "It's now or never," he murmured, standing with controlled urgency. He grabbed the phone and dialed legal. "I need you to call an emergency shareholders meeting. Today, in 2 hours. Mr. Cole, it's Friday. I don't care if it's a national holiday. Make it happen." He hung up. Downtown, Lily walked along the wet sidewalks carrying a bouquet of flowers wrapped in brown paper. She was headed to the small apartment of Margaret, her elderly neighbor and confidant who was recovering from hip surgery. She climbed the steps slowly, feeling the cold seeping through her coat. She rang the doorbell, and the door opened within seconds. "You didn't have to come. And leave you with those hideous hospital flowers. Not a chance." Margaret laughed and stepped aside to let Lily in. "You look different," she said, as Lily arranged the bouquet in a vase. "Just tired. Lie. You're conflicted. And when you're conflicted, you go quiet." Lily paused, eyes fixed on the glass of the vase. "He's trying to change." Margaret didn't ask who. She knew. "And you want to believe it?" "I don't know. Part of me does. Part of me thinks it's too late. Maybe it is. But real change only proves itself through action, not words." 2 hours later, at the top of EC Capital's skyscraper, the company's major shareholders sat around the large conference table. The air was tense, eyes were sharp, watchful, some skeptical. Ethan entered with firm steps, holding a black folder. He greeted the room with a nod and positioned himself at the front. "Thank you for coming on such short notice. The reason for this meeting isn't simple, and it's not pleasant." Mark entered from the side and stood near the door. His suit jacket was unbuttoned, his expression tense. Ethan opened the folder and pulled out a thick stack of documents. "Over the past few weeks, there have been suspicious movements within a group of funds linked to one of our investors, Lily Parker. These actions were carried out without my knowledge and with the intention of devaluing her portfolio on purpose." Murmurs spread across the room. "I have here concrete proof that my partner, Mark Richmond, was directly responsible for these actions. In addition, there's evidence he used company resources for personal gain without board approval." "This is absurd," Mark cut in, stepping forward. "You're attacking me because you couldn't control the woman who tried to ruin your reputation." "I'm doing this because the truth matters," Ethan shot back, "and because ethics are not negotiable." Silence followed. One of the board members requested access to the documents. Another called for a vote. In less than 40 minutes, Mark was officially removed from his position and asked to leave. He said nothing, but the look he gave Ethan said it all. This wasn't over. Later that day, Ethan stood outside Lily's building. He held a bag of fresh bread, fruit, and a glass container of soup he'd tried to make himself, partially burnt. He climbed the stairs slowly, heart racing, and knocked on the door. Lily opened it wearing a loose sweatshirt, her hair pulled into a messy bun. "What are you doing here? I brought soup. It's a little burnt, but I ate some and didn't die." She crossed her arms, skeptical. "Is this some kind of gourmet redemption? It's an attempt to do something useful with my own hands." She stared at him for a few seconds, then stepped aside to let him in. They sat at the small kitchen table. Ethan slid the soup toward her. "The meeting happened today. Mark's out." "Seriously?" He nodded. "And tomorrow we're releasing a statement to the press explaining the manipulation, with evidence, signed by me. You're going to expose yourself. I don't care anymore." She leaned back in her chair, studying him. "Why are you doing this now?" "Because I should have done it sooner. Because I don't want to keep defending an empire built on cowardly decisions." Lily bit her lower lip as if weighing something. "I don't think it's enough. Neither do I. But it's a start." She stood and walked to the window, watching the city slowly light up. "You know what's hardest about all this, Ethan?" "What?" "I don't know if I still hate you, or if I'm just afraid of getting hurt again. I understand. And you? I'm afraid I'll never be able to undo what I did." She turned slowly, eyes glistening. "You can't erase the past. But maybe you can stop repeating it. I'm willing. I still don't trust you. Then give me time. And if you fail, then I fail, but I won't run anymore." Lily nodded, acknowledging the effort, though not ready to forgive. "Thanks for the soup." He smiled. "I'm still hungry." "Seriously, you really want to eat that?" "I've had worse. Like my own mistakes." She laughed, for the first time in weeks. And even if it wasn't forgiveness, it was a step. A small step, but a real one. And sometimes that's all you can ask for. Ethan Cole has resigned. The sentence cut through the air like thunder on a clear day. Lily froze in the middle of the room, the remote still in her hand, as the anchor's voice filled her small apartment, each syllable landing like a hammer on her skin. The businessman officially gave up majority control of EC Capital following a series of controversies involving market manipulation and ethical conflicts between partners. In a public statement, he took direct responsibility for past decisions and declared that reputation is worth more than any fortune. Lily sank onto the couch. She didn't blink, barely breathed. The footage that followed showed Ethan leaving the company headquarters, surrounded by cameras, reporters, and security, but he didn't look like he was running. He walked with steady steps, head held high, and a face that looked calm. It wasn't the arrogant man she had met, nor the manipulator who had proposed marriage as part of a bet. It was a man who had finally done what he said he would. Across the city, Ethan closed the car door and dismissed the driver with a simple gesture. He walked alone through the streets of West Village until he reached the entrance of a small corner building. Unremarkable. No doorman, no luxury. He climbed the 3 flights of stairs carrying only a single overnight bag. In his pocket, a letter. Lily wasn't home. Margaret answered the door. "You look like you either fell from heaven or off a 10-story building," she said, eyeing him like a grandmother sizing up a stubborn grandson, probably both. She stepped aside to let him in. "Lily went out to run some errands, but you can wait." Ethan sat in the armchair like a man who'd just returned from war. "I gave it all up, Margaret. My shares, the company. I lost contracts, ended partnerships. And what did you gain? Freedom and fear." She poured a cup of tea, handed it to him, and sat down across from him. "Why the fear?" "Because now that I've taken away everything that made me who I was, I don't know who I am." Margaret smiled softly. "Then maybe now you have the chance to find out." 2 hours later, Lily returned home. She carried paper bags, a folder full of documents, and exhaustion written all over her face. When she saw Ethan in the living room with Margaret, she stopped in the doorway. I resigned, he said, standing slowly. I gave it all up. Why? Because I realized the only way to show you I'd changed was to lose what defined me most. She dropped the bags to the floor. You didn't need to destroy yourself. I didn't destroy myself. I let go. That doesn't change the past, but it changes the present, and maybe what comes next. She walked toward him, eyes locked on his. What are you expecting now, Ethan? Nothing. I just came to return something. He reached into his coat and pulled out the letter, extending it to her. Lily hesitated before taking it. What is this? The annulment contract, signed. No clauses, no conditions, you're free to go. She swallowed hard. This is the final sacrifice. Lily sat on the couch, still holding the envelope, her fingers trembling. I never wanted to see you fall, but you needed to see how far I'd go. And I went. The silence that filled the room was made of everything left unsaid. The next morning, social media exploded with Ethan Cole's resignation letter. It was short, direct, handwritten. No PR team, no edits. The fallout was brutal. Some called him a coward, others a man of integrity, but most were simply stunned. He vanished from the spotlight, turned off his phone, avoided the press. For a week, Lily heard nothing. She couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. Until one cloudy Sunday, she found a plain envelope in her mailbox. No sender. Inside, a photograph. It was her riding a bike years ago. Hair tied back, tired smile, backpack strapped tight. On the back of the photo, a single line. That was the day I first saw you, and the moment I started to lose myself. No signature, none needed. She leaned against the wall of her apartment, tears slipping down her cheeks. I didn't want it to end like this, she whispered, not like this. That same night, Ethan was seen for the last time entering a community shelter in Brooklyn, where he began volunteering, cleaning, organizing, serving meals. No cameras, no headlines, just him and silence. He wasn't trying to be a different man. He was finally becoming the man he had always been afraid to be, someone who loses everything, only to find something real, something money could never buy. You're really leaving? Margaret asked, leaning against the apartment door, her hands clutching a wool scarf. I am. Lily gave a faint smile, adjusting the strap of her bag over her shoulder. But it's not goodbye, just a pause. The elevator dinged with a soft metallic chime, and the doors opened slowly. Lily glanced inside, then turned back to her friend. Thank you for everything. You going to find something or leave something behind? Margaret asked, with the knowing wisdom of someone who already knew the answer. Both. The doors closed with a gentle hush, leaving behind the scent of freshly brewed coffee and the always open window on the third floor. It was early afternoon when Lily arrived in the small coastal town where Ethan had grown up, a place he'd mentioned only once, offhandedly, while slicing tomatoes for a makeshift dinner. Now she held a slip of paper with the name of a modest shelter, an old school converted by volunteers into a space for the homeless and people in crisis. As soon as she stepped into the courtyard, she was greeted by a middle-aged woman with a clipboard and glasses perched on the tip of her nose. Can I help you? I'm looking for Ethan Cole. The woman looked up, surprised, then nodded slowly. He's helping unload donations in the back storeroom. Lily walked down the wide hallway, the walls covered in murals drawn by local children. As she rounded the final corner, she saw him from behind, carrying a box filled with bags of rice. He wore a grey t-shirt, worn jeans and rubber gloves. His hair was a little longer, his beard unshaven, but his posture was still his, steady, focused, determined. Need a hand with that? She asked softly. Ethan turned slowly, eyes widening for a moment before softening into an expression she hadn't seen in a long time. "Lily," she smiled, stepping fully into the storeroom. "I came to talk, not to promise anything, not to ask for anything, just to talk." He set the box down and pulled off his gloves, wiping his hands on his jeans as he stepped toward her. "You look more beautiful than ever. And you're sweaty." He laughed for the first time in months, and that was enough to shift the air between them. "Can I show you something?" he asked. Lily nodded. He led her into a small room next door where he'd been sleeping. A narrow bed, a second-hand wardrobe, stacks of books in one corner, and a desk filled with handwritten notes. "What's this?" "A project draft. I want to use what's left of my personal fortune to create transition centers, housing and training programs for people who need it. Small, direct, functional, non-profit. And you're going to live like this? Simply giving everything away? I don't need to prove anything anymore, and everything I truly needed, I lost because of me." She looked at him for a moment, then walked to the desk and picked up a sheet with sketched floor plans. "This is beautiful. It's still just an idea, but everything I have now starts with ideas." Lily turned, still holding the paper. "Do you know why I came?" "No, but I'm glad you did. I read your letter, the photo, the line. I thought long and hard before sending it. I thought long and hard before coming. They stepped closer, no urgency, no promises. I loved you, Ethan, and I hated you just as hard. For months. I hated myself too, still do sometimes. But today, I feel something else." "What do you feel?" She took a deep breath, eyes brimming. "Compassion. Not just for you, for me too. I carried so much weight, so much anger, and now it all feels small. I never deserved your forgiveness, and I never knew how to forgive. Did you come to forgive me?" "No, I came to say I might be willing to try." He didn't say anything. He just held out his hand. She didn't hesitate. She took it. It was simple. It was everything. Months later, the small transition center gained recognition for its effectiveness and human approach. Lily, now a co-founder, split her time between running the project and offering free design classes for women in vulnerable situations. Ethan kept a low profile but was always present. He managed logistics, finances, and quietly began writing a book about his journey, still untitled. The media occasionally sought them out, but they always declined interviews. On the center's porch, sometimes at sunset, they'd sit side by side, hands intertwined, silence shared. "Do you think we're happy?" he asked her once. "I think we're learning to be." "And is that enough?" Today it is. One afternoon, a little girl who frequented the center watched them quietly. "Are you two married?" Lily smiled and answered, "We are, but not how you'd expect." "Then why do you live in different houses?" Ethan laughed. "Because we each had to find a home inside ourselves before we could share one outside." The girl nodded, as if she understood more than she let on. "Is that like love?" Lily replied, "It's love with scars, but still love." That night, as they closed the windows of the center together, Ethan looked at Lily and said quietly, "It wasn't a bet." She looked at him, eyes soft. "I know." And finally, that was enough. The end.
What it meant to you. Remember to hit the like and subscribe buttons. This is really important for the channel. Really important. And if you're ready for another story of love and hope, click the first card or the second one to watch the full playlist. See you there.